Apa, apa.
We're working to connect a region of over 600 million bridges between our lands.
Hello, I'm Eliana Sebastian. Welcome to ASEAN in Focus. On today's headline,
bahwa kesatuan ASEAN sangat penting.
Southeast Asian nations have made no significant progress on implementing a peace plan to end the bloodshed in Myanmar. As the summit wrapped up, Indonesian President Joko Widodo insisted ASEAN members must remain united in resolving the crisis.
I expressed our commitment to the principle.
President Marcos Jr. arrived in Manila on Thursday following his participation in the successful 42nd ASEAN Summit and related summits in Labuan Bajo, Indonesia.
Political
President Marcos Jr. said he has asked Indonesian President Joko Widodo to re-examine the case of jailed overseas Filipino worker Mary Jane Veloso, who has been on Indonesia's death row over drug-related charges. And the Philippine Navy's missile frigate ended its participation in the two-day at-sea phase of the inaugural ASEAN-India maritime exercise in the South China Sea on May 8. First in our news, Southeast Asian nations have made no significant progress on implementing a peace plan to end the bloodshed in Myanmar. Indonesian President Joko Widodo said Thursday as the summit wrapped up. Widodo insisted ASEAN members must remain united in resolving the crisis or risk the breakup of the bloc. Take a look.
Bahwa kesatuan ASEAN sangat penting. Tanpa kesatuan akan mudah bagi pihak lain untuk memecah ASEAN. Dan saya tidak yakin tidak satupun, saya ulang, saya yakin tidak satupun negara ASEAN menginginkan hal tersebut.
The lack of progress of the 5-point of consensus, the implementation of 5PC, does not mean ASEAN has to give up, especially giving up the principle in the ASEAN Charter.
Widodo insisted ASEAN members must remain united in resolving the crisis or risk the breakup of the bloc. But members were divided over how to handle the issue. An internal report on the foreign ministers' discussions said some countries wanted to invite the junta back to ASEAN meetings because the time for isolation has served its purpose.
ASEAN has not been able to resolve most problems, contentious ones. We are stuck with the principle of non-intervention, which I agree, and we all agree. But when the problem arises, say in the case of the Myanmar experience, and the ramifications, repercussions affect the region. And I've expressed this rather strongly because it's affecting Malaysia, our political, economic, social problems due to our inability to resolve based on the principle of non-interference. So yes, there is non-interference, but we will have to then have a new vision that could give us some flexibility in order to navigate and maneuver.
Myanmar still belongs to the 10-member ASEAN bloc but has been barred from its summits due to the junta's failure to implement the peace plan. The junta has turned international criticism and refused to engage with its opponents. which include ousted lawmakers, anti-coup People's Defense Forces, and armed ethnic minority groups. President Marcos Jr. arrived in Manila on Thursday following his participation in the successful 42nd ASEAN Summit and related summits in Labuan Bajo, Indonesia. President Marcos also expressed the Philippines' commitment to the principles of free trade and the multilateral trading system. He called for enhanced support for nano businesses, as well as micro, small, and medium enterprises and their integration into the global economy. Take a look.
I expressed our commitment to the principles of free trade and the multilateral trading system, called for enhanced support for nano businesses, MSMEs, and their integration into the global economy. We continue to work towards long-term food and energy security and to address the impacts of climate change, amongst other things. During the discussions on the situation in Myanmar, I called for Myanmar to adhere to the 5-point consensus and express support for Indonesia's enhanced initiatives in the implementation of the 5-point consensus. We also came to an agreement that we would adjust our approach on the situation in Myanmar and to try to engage Myanmar at every level and to all the political factions that are active and are involved in that crisis situation in Myanmar. We came to this conclusion simply because we say what we have done. We have laid out the 5 points of consensus and we put it forward to Myanmar, but it has been 2 years and there has been no movement. And we decided we must try, we must do it another way. And there are many members who have experience in these long ongoing political negotiations, and the advice is to engage everyone equally, and that is what we intend to do.
During the meeting with ASEAN leaders, Marcos emphasized the importance of upholding the international rules-based system, which has underpinned regional security, peace, and order in the region. Take a look.
During our meeting with the ASEAN leaders, I emphasized the importance of upholding the international rules-based system which has underpinned regional security, peace, and order in our region.
He reaffirmed the Philippines' commitment to the peaceful resolution of disputes and advocated for a rules-based maritime order anchored on the 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS. President Marcos Jr. also said he has asked Indonesian President Joko Widodo to re-examine the case of jailed overseas Filipino worker Mary Jane Veloso, who has been on Indonesia's death row over drug-related charges. During his brief talk with Widodo, Marcos also said while he respects the prevailing laws in Indonesia as far as illegal drug charges are concerned, the Philippine government is working hard on the Veloso's case. President Marcos earlier said the Philippine government has not given up on Veloso, adding that it is pursuing all legal remedies, including asking for her pardon, commutation of sentence, or even extradition to serve her sentence in the Philippines. The president said Indonesia answered them that this is the law, and they have already given us postponement, but he said that doesn't mean it's done. Veloso has been jailed in Indonesia since 2010, when about 2.6 kilograms of heroin were found in her suitcase. 6 months after her arrest, Veloso was meted out the death penalty. Her execution in April 2015 was postponed following the arrest of her recruiters in the Philippines. In other news, the Philippines economy grew more than expected in the first 3 months of the year. Official data showed Thursday, though the pace was the slowest in 2 years, as soaring inflation and interest rate hikes crimped consumer spending. The 6.4% expansion in the first 3 months was well down from the revised 7.1% enjoyed in the last quarter of 2022, which analysts said could give the country's central bank some room to step back from its monetary tightening drive. Expectations were for 6.2% growth. Take a look.
The high prices, elevated prices last year, as you know, resulted in tightening of monetary policy, no? So that the interest rates increase. That the effects of those would be felt in latter months, no?
Socioeconomic Planning Secretary Arsenio Balisacan said the lower print was partly due to high inflation and last year's rate hikes, which reined in consumer spending. Consumer spending slowed to 6.3% in the first quarter, down from 10% during the same period last year.
And so perhaps we are starting to feel that because there are usually some lag effects. But then, as we said earlier, the fact that this inflation has begun to come down, and we expect that trajectory to the target rate of 2 to 4% by the end of the year, that could rebuild the confidence of the consumers, no, and the business community, and so that could get spending again and investment moving up again. And
the Philippine Central Bank raised interest rates several times last year to rein in inflation, which hit its highest level in more than a decade. Balisacan said the government remained confident it will hit its growth target this year despite headwinds.
Despite various risks and challenges, the economic outlook for the Philippines in the near and medium term remains solid. We are confident that we will reach our target for this year of 6.0 to 7.0% growth rate and 6.5 to 8.0% for 2024 to 2028. The Filipino people can rest assured that we are committed to achieving rapid, sustained, and inclusive economic growth. We strongly encourage everyone to contribute to building a prosperous, inclusive, and resilient Philippines.
The Philippines had previously trimmed its growth target as geopolitical and trade tensions, a possible global economic slowdown, and typhoons could dampen economic activity. Balisacan said the ongoing conflict between Ukraine and Russia, as well as tensions in the South China Sea and the Taiwan Strait, were among the risks to the growth outlook. After nearly 2 decades in exile, billionaire Thaksin Shinawatra remains one of the most influential figures in Thai politics, but Sunday's election could be his family's last chance to retake power. Thailand's May 14 election may be the last chance for the Shinawatra political clan to control the government, but they must first defeat the military and its allies on the right in a resurgent radical pro-democracy movement to the left. Take a look.
มันเป็นการเลือกตั้งสำหรับผมมองว่านี่คือการเดิมพันครั้งสุดท้ายของคุณทักษิณและคนในตระกูลชินวัตรที่ระดมทรัพยากรทางการเมืองมาใช้ในการเลือกตั้งรอบนี้นะครับคือถ้าไม่แลนด์สไลด์หรือไม่สามารถเป็นที่หนึ่งในการจัดตั้งรัฐบาลได้เนี่ยผมคิดว่าด้วยวัยปีนี้คุณทักษิณวัย74 ปีนะครับความอยากหรือการจะกลับมาในประเทศไทยก็คงจะมืดมนคงจะยากนะครับ
In Thai politics, securing the most seats is no guarantee of victory. A junta rewrote the constitution in 2017 to give the military a huge advantage in future elections. And Thaksin has had to watch from afar as other parties with more radical pro-democracy platforms have eaten into few Thai support. Thaksin tweeted Tuesday that he plans to return to Thailand by his July 26th birthday, saying he is ready to face justice in numerous corruption cases against him. But rather than the courts or military, one witness said the skyrocketing popularity of the Progressive Move Forward Party, or MFP, which has gained support from the youth who led pro-democracy protests 3 years ago, posed the bigger, longer-term challenge.
ขณะเดียวกันเนี่ยสำนึกคนชุดใหม่เนี่ยเกิดการเลือกแบบstrategic voter หมายถึงว่าการเลือกทางยุทธศาสตร์หมายความว่าคนก็เลือกพรรคการเมืองเพื่อเป็นแกนนำจัดตั้งรัฐบาลแม้ว่าอุดมการณ์ทางการเมืองเราจะชอบพรรคการเมืองนี้แต่ขนาดพรรคการเมืองที่ตัวเองเนี่ยยังคิดว่ายังใหญ่ไม่พอเนี่ยก็อาจจะเลือกพรรคการเมืองที่มีโอกาสจัดตั้งรัฐบาลใหญ่กว่าเช่น
Millions will vote on Sunday as few Thai takes on establishment players by former junta chief Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha and his new United Thai Nation or UTN party. The Shinawatra family has been a dominant presence in Thai politics for over 20 years. Parties linked to the family have won the most seats at every election since 2001. 16 was prime minister between 2001 and 2006, while his sister Yingluck served as leader from 2011 until Prayut ousted her in the 2014 coup.
ดังนั้นมันจึงเป็นการเดิมพันที่สูงมาก เพราะว่าถ้าพรรคเพื่อไทยไม่ได้เป็นรัฐบาลรอบนี้เนี่ยก็จะยิ่งยากกับการจะกลับเข้ามาเป็นรัฐบาลในอนาคตยิ่งถ้าถูกยุบแล้วก็มีลักษณะว่าไม่ไปที่พรรคเดียวกันทั้งหมดและเป็นการแตกทัพ
Now to Vietnam, where state electricity company warned on Wednesday that the national power system would come under strain this summer due to anticipated heat waves, days after the country recorded its highest ever temperature. The temperature surpassed 44 degrees Celsius or 111 degrees Fahrenheit in central Vietnam over the weekend, according to national forecasters, breaking a previous high set in 2019. State utility EVN said in a statement that demand for electricity in the next 3 months, as temperatures peak in northern Vietnam, could outstrip supply. It also warned of low water levels that could have a severe impact on the country's hydroelectric dams. EVN called on consumers to save energy, especially during peak hours at noon and in the evening. It urged people to set air conditioners to 26 degrees Celsius or above and avoid using a large capacity electric appliances at the same time. The communist country relies mostly on coal and hydropower for its energy, but has said it wants to increase renewable energy production in the coming years. Scientists say global warming is exacerbating adverse weather, with a recent report from the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change warning that every increment of global warming will intensify multiple and concurrent hazards. Also this week, Filipino and American fighter jet pilots conducted air-to-air combat training over the skies of Clark Air Base, Mabalacat City, Pampanga. The training focused on defensive and offensive counter-air operations. Take a look.
Yes, that's right. So we really need to train with our allies because we have, shared interests, shared security concerns in the region, and so we really need to partner with our defense partners during training to ensure the interoperability between our forces.
Okay, without doing these kinds of exercise, we are very limited to training against our own aircraft. So basically, ang nasi-simulate lang po natin na threats are it's either 2v1, isang threat lang po yung papasok sa ating territory. But with this kind of exercises, we can simulate multiple threats and we can react as a coalition.
The Philippines and the United States deploy fighter jets for combat training at Clark Air Base to improve the coordination of the Allies' air forces. The exercise, dubbed Hope Thunder, is a revival of the air combat training between the Treaty Allies 3 decades ago, which involves hundreds of their airmen. It was first held in 1976 and continued annually in the Philippines until its discontinuation after the Mount Pinatubo eruption in 1990. The multilateral exercise was then moved to Alaska and was dubbed Red Flag Alaska. The Philippine Navy's missile frigate ended its participation in the 2-day at-sea phase of the inaugural ASEAN India maritime exercise in the South China Sea on May 8. The at-sea phase of the AIME took place last May 7 to 8. Ensign Manuel R. Orpilla, the Navy Public Affairs Office Chief aboard BRP Antonio Luna, said this activity comprises numerous events involving ships conducted with ASEAN member states, navies, and Indian Navy counterparts. Orpilla said BRP Antonio Luna is heading back to the Philippines and shifts its focus to the ASEAN Fleet Review on May 11, which will be participated by ASEAN navies in the second iteration of ASEAN multilateral naval exercise to open at Subic, Zambales on May 12. This year's AIME took place from May 2 to 8. The BRP Antonio Luna arrived in Singapore last May 1. Chinese and American warships were among those displayed at Singapore's Changi Naval Base on Thursday as part of the biennial Index Naval Defense Show, which returned to Singapore after a 4-year hiatus during the pandemic. Take a look.
Let's say around about 10 years ago, there was a very strong interest in the growth of the naval requirement to deal with lower order threats. I'm thinking of things like piracy, for example, illegal fishing, these kind of threats to good order at sea. And that resulted in a big sort of interest in even kind of conventional defence firms that we must provide the kind of technology that will help navies cope with that sort of thing. But now with the growth of great power competition, there's no question at all, a question of lethality. In other words, how do we actually get strike capacity in order to be able to deter, in order to fight the wars that we cannot prevent and all that sort of thing. So all of the firms have now shifted, if you like, their focus of attention up the scale of intensity.
Really interesting to see the autonomy revolution that's happening at the moment. I think a lot of organisations are really looking forward to automating several industries using robotics and AI algorithms. So that's been really interesting to see this week.
Unmanned systems are much lower cost, and there's no risk of life when these drones are used. So I think it's an adoption that is happening at a rapid pace, and we're seeing a lot of interest in the Asia-Pacific region.
22 warships from 13 countries were on display at the naval base, while over 250 companies from around the world participated in the exhibition, according to organizers. This 8th edition of the Buy and Invite Only conference focused on safe and secure seas, emerging stronger as a maritime community, and features a special session on adapting roles of our community to evolving maritime threats. The exhibition also allowed startups to showcase their solutions to more than 230 exhibitors at the event. As my usual habit, I'd like to end the day on a positive note. Let's encourage and build each other up so that no one is left behind. From EBC Vietnam Bureau, I'm Algana Faith Sebastian. We'll live in extraordinary times.